Video editors, in this tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to create this viral white minimal editing style that's blowing up in educational short form content. Editors are using this editing style to make over $2,000 every single month. So if you're serious about learning what actually works in 2026, you'll want to master this one. Here's exactly what we're going to do in this tutorial. First, I'll show you how to extract a short form clip from a podcast. Then we'll build 3 clean minimal animations from scratch in After Effects, a brain and dumbbell setup, a skull zoom out with a finger pointing interaction, and a clean 2-object composition to finish the scene. And by the end of this tutorial, you'll know exactly how to create an edit like this from scratch. So download the project files and the assets down below, and let's go ahead and dive right in. First, we need to build the story. We're gonna go through the long form footage, pick the moments that fit together, and piece them into a story that flows naturally. So let's get into it. I started by watching the podcast and searching for a strong hook that can lead into a clear story. Right here, he mentions that he tries to give advice to his friends. I chose this because it's relatable and instantly gives curiosity. It makes people wonder, what advice is he gonna give to his friends? So I made a cut and deleted the previous footage to start strong. Then I kept moving forward through the podcast and looked for moments that support the idea. When he talks about punishment, I made another cut and saved that selection. I kept this part because it adds tension and makes the message stronger. After that, when he mentions that no one is watching, I made another cut and I removed everything unnecessary. I continued watching and found another key moment where he talks about not keeping commitments to yourself. So I made a cut here as well and trimmed the clip to keep only the important part. And right here, he also mentions not having faith. I kept that to elevate the emotional side of the story. And so I made another cut, trimmed the clip, and snapped everything back together. Finally, when he talks about stacking things, I made one last cut because it gives the story a clear takeaway. Now we're going to rearrange everything for flow, remove silences, add J-cuts for smoother pacing, and just like that, we have a clean, raw video to be edited. But before we dive in and start creating animations, let's quickly break down and understand how these animations are made. This minimal white editing style actually follows a clear, structured workflow. After studying this style over multiple viral videos, I found a structured workflow that makes everything look clean and professional. And the first step is creating the background. It's made of a subtle gradient, a light texture, and some casted shadows. This gives the video a very clean base and makes everything feel polished instead of flat. Then we add the main object in the center of the screen. This is the main focus of the viewer's attention, so we give it a texture and a casted shadow to make it stand out from the background. After that, we add complementary text around the object. This text supports what's being said and helps communicate the message visually without distracting from the main focus. We usually just keep it very simple with a light gradient. And finally, we add elements on the edges of the screen with a subtle blur. These create depth and make the scene feel more dynamic, so the frame doesn't feel flat. So the workflow is simple: background, main object, complementary text, and depth elements. And if we just follow this exact workflow, we're going to be able to create clean, high-quality animations every time. And we didn't discover this workflow by accident. In fact, we did a lot of research in order to understand how this style is made. Then we broke it down into theoretical lessons and then practical lessons where we put this theory into practice, all inside our minimal animation masterclass in Ultimate Editors 2.0. And this is just one of the many editing styles you'll learn in this in-depth program. If you want step-by-step courses that break down high-quality styles like this one, we're going to teach you 4 viral editing styles inside of Ultimate Editors 2.0. Click the link down below and get access to the community. But with all this being said, let's dive into our first animation and create it from scratch. Start by opening up After Effects and click on New Project. Create a new composition 1080 by 1920 and click on OK. Now drag the video into the composition and let's start by creating our background. Go ahead and right click and add a new solid and click on OK. Then drag the 4-color gradient on it, disable the visibility so we can see the video under it, and we'll choose our colors based on this video to maintain a consistent color palette. Click on this eyedropper tool from our first color and choose a color from this screen. Now do the same to the rest of the colors, but make sure to have different color variations. And after we turn on our solid layer, this is what we end up with. Then duplicate the layer, delete the 4-color gradient from the bottom layer, and add a fill and set the color to white. Then set the opacity for the layer above to 50%, and this is just to blend it better. Now just a quick reminder before we begin this animation is actually going to take us a little longer to create because we're building everything from scratch. Once we do them, we won't need to do that again brain and we'll be able to save more time on the other two animations. So now we're going to drag a rough texture into After Effects and set the blending mode to color burn and scale it like so. Up next, we're going to drag a shadow texture into our composition, scale it like so, and set the opacity to 35%. And now that our background is ready and the scene is fully textured, it's time to introduce the main object and design it. Head up to Google and search up a brain image. I ended up choosing this picture over here. I copied it and headed over into removal.ai and I pasted it over here. This is going to remove the background from the image, and after it was done, I saved it and dragged it into After Effects. I rotated just a tiny bit and scaled it up. Then drag a hue and saturation effect on it, decrease the saturation and lightness like so. This is going to blend it in with our scene. And now to create our casted shadow, we duplicate it, delete the hue and saturation from the layer, drag a fill effect on it, set the color to black, pre-compose it, and add the CC radial fast blur on it. Move the point up here in this corner and set the amount to 75. Then simply decrease the opacity to 65% for a more subtle look. Now to texture the brain, I dragged a halftone texture into the composition. Scaled it like so. Using this pick whip, I track matted it to our brain and set the blending mode to multiply and the opacity to 50%. Right click on the brain layer, go to layer styles and add an inner shadow. Expand the tab and increase the size and drop down the opacity to 55% to add more shadow to the brain. And now that our background is ready and our brain is fully textured, it's time to work on the complementary text. Right click and add in a text layer. Then write out self-esteem, center the text and scale it down. Change the font to Helvetica, heavy compressed, scale the text a bit, place it over here and drag the text layer below the brain layer. This will add more depth to our scene. After that, drag a gradient ramp onto the text layer, move the points like so, change the top color to a lighter brown and the bottom color to a more dark brown. Then duplicate the text layer, place the layer above, move the text down here and change the font type to regular. Write out self-story, scale it down, move it right here, place the gradient ramp points accordingly and change the top color to a dark gray and the bottom color to a black. Change the font to Edwardian script to make it look more elegant, scale the text up, move it over to here and place the layer under the brain layers. Finally, set the opacity to 40% to blend it in nicely. Now duplicate the text again, move it a bit down, change the font to Helvetica regular, scale it down like so, and write out what you think of yourself. Then set the opacity to 100%, center it like so, move the gradient points accordingly, set the bottom color to a lighter gray, reduce the opacity to 50%, and set the top color to a lighter black. Then just move down the text just a bit. Finally, to make the text look better, I ended up scaling down the self-story text, went to the middle of the text and pressed space a couple of times on my keyboard to create some spaces like so. Then I simply moved the text up and entered it like so. And for the other text, I just moved it up a little bit like that. And now that our background is in place, our main object is in place, and our complementary text is designed, it's time to add the depth elements on the edges of our scene. Head up to Google and search up a pen image. After we found it, copy the image and go to Removal AI and paste it to remove the background. Save it and bring it into After Effects, copy the hue and saturation effect from our brain and paste it on the pen, then rotate it just a tiny bit like so, bring it over here, scale it up and adjust its position and rotation. Drag a drop shadow effect onto it, increase the distance and the softness, and up next, add a Gaussian blur on it as well and increase it like so. Then right click on the layer, go to layer styles and add an inner shadow and increase it to the size of 43. After that, head up back to Google and search for a notebook image. After you found it, copy it and paste it on Removal AI to remove its background, save it and bring it into After Effects. Go to the pen layer, hold down Shift, select all the effects, copy them, then go to the notebook layer and paste them. Move it up here and adjust the drop shadow's position. And now that our background, our main element, our complementary text, and even our depth elements are all in place, it's finally time to animate them. Let's go and get started with the text. We're going to be creating a pop-up blur animation. So, drag a transform effect onto the self-esteem text layer and add a Gaussian blur. Keyframe the blurriness, position, and opacity. Move back, set the blurriness to 15, drop down the position, and set the opacity to 0. Select the keyframes and go into the speed graph. Click on position, start it fast and end it slow. Then click on opacity and do the same thing. And for the blurriness, do the same thing again. And this is what you're going to end up with. Then hold down Shift on your keyboard, select the Gaussian blur and transform effect, copy them, and move back to the beginning and paste it on the other two layers. After that, just delay the layers like so. And now that our text is animated, let's go ahead and animate the depth elements. Hold down Shift and select the pen and notebook. Press P for position and keyframe it, and press R for rotation and keyframe it. Go to the end of the layer, move the notebook to the right just a tiny bit, and play with the rotation as well, making the rotation very subtle and minimal. And for the pen, move it to the left, like so, and rotate it a bit. Now moving into animating the brain, go ahead and parent the shadow and texture layer to the brain. That way, if we move the brain, they're gonna move together. Keyframe the scale and the rotation, move back, scale it up, and rotate it just like so. Select the keyframes, go into the speed graph, and start it fast and end it slow. And this is what we end up with. Now let's just go ahead and add a tiny detail that will get this scene to life even more. Select the pen tool and start by drawing a curved line just like so. Remove the fill, enable the stroke, and increase the size to 292. Then click on stroke again and enable the gradient fill. Drag these two handles just like so to spread the gradient and drop the opacity to 25%. Then change the white color to black and the other color to a darker gray. After that, set the blending mode to multiply, and to add more contrast, expand the contents like so and click on add and trim pass. Keyframe the end, move it forward, and drop it down to 0. Select the keyframes, go into the speed graph, and then start it fast and also end it slow. Then just add a Gaussian blur onto the shape layer and increase it so the line looks like a shadow. And this is what we end up with. And now that the first scene is done, it's finally time to move into our second scene. And since we've built everything from scratch in the first scene, we won't need to do that again, which is gonna save us a lot of time. So moving on to our next scene, when he talks about commitment, I went ahead on Google and searched for a dumbbell image. After I found it, I copied it and pasted it into Removal AI to remove the background. Save it and drag it into After Effects, and let's begin designing our scene. Copy the hue and saturation and drop shadow from our notebook and paste it on the dumbbell. Rotate it, scale it like so, and place it over here. Change the drop shadow's direction to face our scene and drop down the opacity to 25%. Duplicate the halftone texture, bring it up, and place it over the dumbbell layer. Move it to the right where our dumbbell is, scale it up, and parent it to the dumbbell layer. Delete the drop shadow from the dumbbell, and let's create a casted shadow. Duplicate the layer, right-click on the bottom, and pre-compose it. Add a fill effect onto it and set the color to black. Then add a CC radial fast blur and place the center in this corner over here. Then right-click on the dumbbell layer, layer styles, and click on inner shadow. Expand the tab and drag the size to 54, and this is going to add more shadow to our dumbbell. Now duplicate the what you think text layer and drag it over to here. Change the text to will be correlated. Duplicate it again and write out to the. Duplicate it again and write the size. Duplicate it again and write of the. And duplicate it again and write commitment. Then spread them across the screen to see each word and start by rearranging and scaling them just like so. After that, go into the first scene, copy the gradient term from the word self-esteem and paste it on the word size. And for the word commitment, change the font to Edwardian script, scale it up, and place it like so. Now to create some variation to the text, just delay them like so. Duplicate the phrase will be correlated, move it down, and change the text to you keep, and just decrease the opacity to 50%, and just move it over to here. Finally, parent the textured layer and the casted shadow layer to the dumbbell, move to the end, keyframe the position and the rotation, move the keyframes to the beginning, and then go to the end and drag the dumbbell into this scene like so, and rotate it a bit. Duplicate this shape layer from the other scene, move it over to here, and play with the curve until you like what it looks. And now that we've completed our first animation, let's add some zoom-ins to top it off. Right-click and add a new adjustment layer, drag the transform effect and a Gaussian blur onto it. Keyframe the blurriness at 30 and the scale at 140. Go to the end of the first scene and set the scale to 110 and the blurriness to 0. Select the last two keyframes and bring them closer a bit. Then select all of them, go into the speed graph, start it fast and end it slow. Now to transition into the next scene, keyframe the position around here. Move to the end of the first scene and move it to the right just a tiny bit. Select the keyframes for position, go into the speed graph, start it slow and end it fast. And then just set the Gaussian blur to 30. Select the keyframes and just do the same speed graph as the position one. For the other scene, duplicate the adjustment layer and move it over it. Disable the scale keyframe and set the value to 110 and delete all keyframes. Keyframe the position and the blurriness and go to the beginning, move to the position and left a little bit and set the blurriness to 30. Select the keyframes, go into the speed graph and start it fast and end it slow. And finally, it's time for some post-production to spice out our scene a little bit more. Create an adjustment layer and drag the CC vignette on it and set the angle of view to 30. Duplicate the adjustment, delete the CC vignette, add a Gaussian blur and set it to 30 and select your ellipse tool and create a mask just like so. Click on inverted to inverse it and set the feather to 200. Duplicate the adjustment layer again, delete the CC vignette, add a noise effect and set it to 10%. Finally, duplicate the adjustment layer again, delete the noise and add in the posterized time effect and set it to 12. And this is what we're gonna end up with. Now real quick, if you're a beginner editor watching this, you're probably realizing something. This style looks simple, but creating it takes a lot of advanced techniques and concepts, and we're barely even scratching the surface. And in 2026, learning viral editing styles like this one on YouTube is harder than ever. There's hundreds of editing styles, hundreds of YouTube tutorials to follow, and no plan on what you should learn next. That That's exactly why we built Ultimate Editors 2.0, the step-by-step beginner program that's going to teach you the viral editing styles of 2026 and teach you how to make $2,000 per month as a video editor within just 90 days of joining. In Ultimate Editors 2.0, we're going to teach you Premiere Pro and After Effects from scratch, the 4 viral editing styles of 2026, the cinematic style, the minimal style, the SaaS animation style, and the viral animation breakdowns, and the blueprint to making $2,000 per month as an editor. And the best part is beginner editors like you guys are joining and becoming viral editors within just a few months, and even going on to make thousands and thousands of dollars with video editing. So if you want the step-by-step roadmap to learning the viral editing styles of 2026 and making serious money with video editing, click the link down below and check out Ultimate Editors 2.0. But now that that's out of the way, our first animation is complete, so let's go ahead and dive into our second one. But as I mentioned before, because we've already built everything from scratch, we can just reuse the elements and now make it much faster. Just watch how quickly we're about to make our second animation here. Let's get into it. Let's start by selecting all our background layers, duplicate them, and bring them over here. Head up to Google and search for a skull image, and after you found it, copy it and paste it into Removal AI to remove the background. After the background was removed, save it and drag it into After Effects. Scale it up like so and duplicate it and add a fill on it to create a casted shadow. Set the fill to black and add a CC radial fast blur. Move the point up here and increase the amount to 85. Then just move the pre-composed layer under the skull and set the opacity to 50%. Right-click on the skull layer and add an inner shadow. Expand the tab, set the distance to 0 and the size to 63. Duplicate the halftone texture and bring it down to here and track matte it to the skull. Then enable the layer. Duplicate the will be correlated text and bring it here. Change the text to downward, set the font type to heavy compressed, and scale it up and place it here. Duplicate it again and change the text to commitment, scale it up and place it here, and also move the other text layer like so. Duplicate it again, move it down here, change the text to spiral, and change the font type to heavy compressed and move it to the right just a tiny bit. Select the commitment text and place the layer behind the skull layer. Go back to the first animation, copy the gradient ramp from the word size, and paste it on the word spiral. Adjust the gradient points like so, and change the second color to black and the first color to a dark brown. Copy the gradient, paste it on the word downward, and adjust the points like so. For the word commitment, adjust the points accordingly and change the second color to black and set the opacity to 50%. Then for the word downwards and spiral, set the blending mode to multiply for a better blend, and to make the animation even nicer, delay the layers like so, this way they won't all start at once. Duplicate the will be correlated text from the previous animation again and bring it here. Change the text to I think you can get into, move up here, and adjust the gradient points accordingly and set the opacity to 50%. Duplicate it again, move it down here, change the text to because of that, and delay it like so. Parent the casted shadow and the halftone texture to the skull layer so that we can animate it, and keyframe the scale, move back and set it to 100, select the keyframes and start it fast and end it slow. Duplicate the shape layer from the previous animation, move it over to here, and open the contents and delete the paths. Press P for the pen tool and start drawing a zigzag just like so. And now to animate it, add in the trim paths function, keyframe the end at 0, move it back, increase it to 100, and move it to the end of the layer. Select the keyframes and then start it slow and end it slow. Finally, move the layer behind the skull and the text layers just like so, and duplicate the adjustment layer from the previous animation and bring them over here. And select the adjustment layers with the transform effect, click U to see all the keyframes, then delete the position and the blur keyframes from here and move the scale keyframe back here. And this is what we are going to end up with. And now that our second animation is complete, let's go ahead and move into our third one to keep the workflow fast and consistent. Let's go ahead and jump straight into it. Select the background layers from the previous animation and duplicate them and bring them over to here. Head up to Google and search for a skeleton hand pointing image. Copy it and paste it into Removal AI to remove the background, and after the background is removed, save it and drag it into After Effects. Rotate it to -90 degrees, scale it up and place it like so. Duplicate the halftone image, drag it over here, track matte it to the hand layer and turn it on. Then adjust the halftone image and scale it up. Duplicate the hand image, pre-compose it and add a fill to it. Set the color to black, then drag the CC radial fast blur onto it. Set the point up here and set the amount to 94 to create a nice casted shadow. Then simply drop the opacity to 50% on the shadow layer and add a hue and saturation to the hand, and drop the saturation all the way down. Then right click and add an inner shadow to the hand. Expand the tab and set the distance to 0 and increase the size to 20. Now for the text, go back to the first animation and duplicate the will be correlated text and bring it over. Change the text to just and place it here. Then go back, duplicate the size text and bring it over. Change the text to keep, place it up here and scale it down. Duplicate the word just again, change the text to that and bring it down here, and duplicate the word that, change the text to tiny, move it over to here, and change the font type to italic. Duplicate the word keep, change the text to commitment, scale it down, and place it down here. Now simply adjust the gradient points for the word commitment, copy it, and paste it on the word keep. Then do the same for the other words, adjust the gradient points like so, and to make the text look smoother, just delay the layers like this. After that, parent the shadow layer and the halftones layer to the skeleton hand so we can animate it. Keyframe the position, move back, and drop it down like so. Select the keyframes, start it fast and end it slow. Right-click, create a shape layer, select the rectangle tool, draw a rectangle just like this, and enable the gradients. Change the first color to black and the second one to dark gray. Then simply move the gradient points like so, keyframe the positions for the shape layer, move back and drop it down like so. Select the keyframes and then start it fast and end it slow. Then set the blending mode for the shape layers to multiply for a better blend, duplicate the halftone texture, drag the layer above the shape layer, track matte it to the shape layer, enable it, and scale it up. This way it's gonna have more textures. And to add more depths, duplicate the shape layer, rotate it 180 degrees, move it up like so, and for the animation, delete the first keyframe and the last keyframe, move back, and start the shape layer up like that. And now that we've completed the first scene of this final animation, it's time to dive into the second one. So just head over to Google and search for the Mount Everest picture. After we found it, copy it and paste it into Removal AI to remove its background. When the background's removed, save it and drag it into After Effects. Scale it up, rotate it, and place it in the corner here. Then just play with the position and rotation until you end up with this. Drag a hue and saturation effect and decrease the saturation all the way down to make it black and white. Duplicate it and pre-compose the layer, drag a fill effect onto it and set the color to black, and then drag a CC radial fast blur onto it to create a casted shadow. Move the point to the left like so and set the amount to 75 and decrease the opacity to 50%. Right click on the Mount Everest layer and add an inner shadow to it, set the distance to 0 and increase the size to 73. And now for the text, duplicate just the layer and bring it down here, change the text you don't have to and place it to here. Duplicate the you don't have to layer, change the text to move, change the font type to heavy compressed and scale it up and place it like so, and duplicate the move layer, change the text to Mount Everest, duplicate the font to Edwardian script because it's a special word, remove the word Everest, scale it up and place it here. Duplicate the mount layer, change the text to Everest, scale it up and move it over to here. Go to the previous animation, copy the gradient from the word keep and paste it on the word move and adjust the points like so. After that, paste it on the word mount and the word Everest and just move the points accordingly like so, and delay the layers to make sure they start one after another. Now to spice up this scene a little bit more, head up into Google and search for a waterfall image. Once you found it, copy it and paste it into Removal AI to remove the background, and after the background's removed, save it and drag it into After Effects. Copy the hue and saturation effect from Mount Everest and paste it on the waterfall, rotate it 154 degrees and move it up here and scale it up, duplicate it, pre-compose it, drag a fill effect, set the color to black, add the CC radial fast blur, move the point over to here, increase the amount to 69, and drop down the opacity to 50% for a beautiful casted shadow like so. Now for the text, hold down Shift, select the text layers and Ctrl D to duplicate them. Move them up here and change the first text layer to You Don't Have to Go On and adjust it like so. Change the second text layer to 7 Day, change the third text layer to Ayahuasca, and finally change the last text layer to Retreat. Now only using your cursor, play around with the position of the text until you end up with this layout, then adjust the gradient points for each text to make sure your gradient's visible. In order to animate the mountain, we're going to parent the casted shadow layer to the mountain layer and the other casted shadow layer to the waterfall layer like so. After that, hold down Shift, select the mountain layer and the waterfall layer, press P for position and keyframe the position. Then R for rotation and keyframe the rotation as well. Go to the end of your layers, move the waterfall's position like so, and increase the rotation just a tiny bit. Then do the same for the mountain layer, move it to the right and increase the rotation just a tiny bit like so. Move back to the first animation, duplicate the shape layer with a stroke and bring it over here. Select the pen tool and play with the points until your stroke looks something like this. To make it look even better, turn back the opacity to 100%, decrease the stroke to 53 pixels, set the Gaussian blur to 5, and you can decrease the stroke even more until it looks like this. And now that the scene is designed and animated, it's finally time to finish things off with post-production. Hold down Shift, select the adjustment layers from the first animation, duplicate them, and bring them over to here. For the adjustment layer with the transform effect, drag the position and the blurriness to where the two scenes need to transition, and shrink the layer like so. Then drag the other adjustment layer with the transform effect where the transition starts, and this is what you're going to end up up with. Now, if you made it this far into the tutorial, it means you're very serious. You're not just casually watching editing tutorials. You actually want to get better and maybe even turn this into income. So here's what I'm going to recommend. There's a free video on our website where I break down the exact roadmap to mastering the viral editing styles of 2026 and how editors are making $2,000 per month in 90 days. It shows you what to learn, in what order, and how to actually turn it into money. If you're serious, click the link down below and give it a watch. It's completely for free. And now that the final animation is done and everything is complete, it's finally time to move back into Premiere Pro and finish things off with our subtitles. We're gonna keep this part very quick, but if you want to learn more about creating subtitles, you can check out our full breakdowns on the channel. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Let's start by dragging our After Effects edit into the timeline. Then I made a cut where the animation starts and where it ends and simply align them like so. This way we're gonna make sure that everything is in place and timed correctly. And so go ahead and do the same to the rest of the video, and this is what you end up with. Now to create the subtitles, go up here into Window and click on Text. Go to Captions, hit Create Captions, expand the tab and set the maximum length to 0, maximum duration to 2, lines to single, and click Transcribe and Create Captions. Click on one caption, change the font to Helvetica Regular, increase the font size to 80, center it like so, and move it down a bit. Now to apply the text style to the rest of the text layers, click on this plus icon here, create style, and click on OK. In order to animate them, select all of the caption layers, go up here to Graphics and Titles, and click Upgrade Captions to Graphics. Add a transform effect to the layer, keyframe the position and the opacity, go to the beginning and set the opacity to 0% and drop the position down a bit. Click on this little arrow here for position and drag the handles like this to start it fast and end it slow. Now to apply this animation to the other text layers, right click on the transform effect, click on Save Preset, give it a name and press Enter. Now search it up in the Effects tab, select the text layers and drag the preset onto them. For the parts where there's an animation going, just select text layers and delete them. And for the remaining text layers, move them up by 1, just like so, and extend them. Using our cursor, spread the words across the screen, and then just play with the position and scale until you get the layout of the text. I went ahead and did the same for the rest of the text layers, and this is what we ended up with. And now that we finished all of our animations, our sound design, our music, and everything in the edit, this is what the final white minimal editing style looks like.
When I'm trying to give friends advice, what I say to them is, the rewards you get in terms of self-esteem and self-story, what you think of yourself, will be correlated to the size of the commitment you keep when no one is watching. I actually think the greatest consequence in life is not keeping commitments to yourself. And then I think you can get into a downward commitment spiral because of that. Isn't it really lovely to know that maybe the way to turn that into a positive upward reinforcing spiral is just keep that tiny commitment you made to yourself today. Yeah. Like, you don't have to move Mount Everest, you don't need to go on a 7-day ayahuasca retreat. How about when you said you were going to get in bed at 10 p.m, you do that. Yep. Stack those things for a week. Honestly, I've seen it in my friends and their lives have changed.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching all the way till the end of the video. It really does mean a lot to us that you guys care about these tutorials. If you enjoyed it, let us know down below, or make sure to give this video a like, and stay tuned because we've got some amazing tutorials coming in this month. So make sure to, be subscribed to the channel, leave the notifications on, and all that cool stuff. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks a lot for watching. See you guys there.